Welcome to the Generous Business Owner Podcast, where business owners gain inspiration and encouragement to live a legacy, not just leave one. And now your hosts, Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. My name is Jeff Thomas, and we've got two special guests with us today. We've got John Romnes, who is the founder and CEO of MEI Total Elevator Solutions, and Coralyn Musser, who's the director of outreach and engagement at that company. So you get a twofer, folks. John, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Coralyn, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, well, Coralyn will probably kind of hit your part of this toward the back half. But John, I know you started this company in 1971, and I know you're in Minnesota. But tell us the story of growing up and then the origin of the company.
Okay, well, I was born and raised in northern Minnesota, rural northern Minnesota, about 40 miles north of what they would call the Iron Range, my mom and dad had a country store and a post office. On one side of our garage, there was a sign that said Togo, which is the name of the town. On the other side of our house, there was a sign that said Togo. So we were the family that lived in Togo. Anyway, I went to high school.
Yeah.
I went to grade school a half a mile away for the first 8 years. And after that, I went to high school. It was a 34-mile bus ride, one direction. And I was kind of wild and crazy in high school, later years of high school. I mean, I graduated in 1961 from high school in June, and in November I got married at 18 years old. My wife was 16 and pregnant.
Wow.
And we didn't have an easy start to begin with. We lived the first couple of months we rented an old barber shop in a little town. We had no bathroom. We had an outhouse. I remember we didn't have a refrigerator. We had a gas burner to cook on. We would keep stuff in a cardboard box by the back door, and sometimes the milk would freeze. So it was kind of a crazy start. Anyway, I knew I had to get out of that area. I was working with my father-in-law in the logging business, which I was pretty much worthless at. And I had an uncle in Chicago, and he was like a dad to me, and he really wanted me to come to Chicago. He said, if you come to Chicago, I think I can get you on the fire department or the police department. You work 20 years, maybe 30 years, retire, get a good pension. You move back up in northern Minnesota, and you go hunting and fishing and live happily ever after. And my older brother, who was 8 years older than me, he lived in Minneapolis, and he said, well, why don't you come to Minneapolis? I can't get you a job, but there's a lot of construction work going on, and he was in the elevator business himself, working for one of the major companies. So I decided to go to Minneapolis because that was closer than going to Chicago. Chicago sounded too scary for me, being from northern Minnesota, out in the woods.
Yeah, that's the big city. Yeah.
Right. So
bad things happen in the big city,
Yeah.
Right.
I went to Minneapolis. I got a job at McDonald's. And I remember when I got hired, the guy was real reluctant about hiring me. And the main reason he didn't want to hire me was because I'm left-handed. He said, I don't know how you'll ever work the grill, he said. Of course, nowadays.
we only have right-handed, burger flippers. Yeah.
So anyway, I ended up getting a job at McDonald's. I worked there like 2 weeks. I remember, this is kind of dating me, but at that time, there were only 3 McDonald's in the Twin City area.
Holy cow.
And a burger, fries, and a chocolate shake, I always remember, were 45 cents.
Yeah, wow.
So I worked at that. I worked in a car wash. And then I eventually, after a few weeks, I got a job at Otis Elevator. And that's what got me started in the elevator business. I started as a construction helper, worked on some sizable projects in Minneapolis. And I went from there to another, got laid off, went to another elevator company for a few months, and then got laid off. And then to another company. I was there like 2 years. And then I quit that job and went to work for a real small independent company in the Twin City area. And I know that people thought it was kind of crazy to go to work for this little company. But I really feel it was part of God's plan, because when I went there, I got to do everything. I mean, I was an elevator mechanic, by then a journeyman. And I got to install elevators, adjust elevators, service elevators. I did some estimating, I did some drafting, and we had a little shop connected to the office. So I could observe manufacturing elevator equipment too. So I didn't really get involved working in the shop. But anyway, that's kind of how I got started. And then when we first moved to the Twin Cities, my wife and I, we did not like it. We did not like living in the city. It was just too hectic. But after a period of time, we kind of liked it because everything was so handy,
Yeah,
compared to
exactly.
living 40
Convenient.
miles away from a grocery store.
Right.
So, but then it turned again, and we didn't like it. We had two sons, they started a little bit older, and we wanted to get out of the Twin Cities. So we debated what we could do, and I remember we drove down to two different areas: Mankato, Minnesota, which is
Oh, yeah.
where we ended up landing, and Winona, Minnesota, which is a city along the river. And we went to both towns on two separate weekends, and we decided to move to Mankato because I had a service route down through there and I had a few contacts. So that's how we got started. I mean, we had a home in Richfield, Minnesota, which is a suburb of Minneapolis, a little two-bedroom home. We sold our home and raised some cash, sold my nice car that I had, kind of a flashy car, sold that, bought an old clunky car, and actually bought an extra engine because the thing burned a lot of oil. So I thought, well, I saw an engine in the shopper paper, so I bought an extra engine. So I moved to Mankato with all this stuff, with an old station wagon, rusted out, and an extra engine, which I never had to change. But
Yeah.
it's just kind of crazy. But anyway, that's kind of how we got started.
But
I
you got
borrowed,
a you got a you got a 360-degree look at the business though, right? I mean, you didn't even
right,
know how valuable that lesson, you know what I mean? You're just like,
right.
when
Anyway,
you
my
think,
dad borrowed me $4,000, and of that 4,000, I paid $3,000 back. And the last $1,000, I tried to pay him back, and we'll call that your college education. So I never went to college. But looking back, I can see God's favor on MEI. After I moved to Mankato, starting with no customers, uh, there were certain little problems that I was able to fix. And I look back and I thought, how did I, some equipment I worked on that I was totally unfamiliar with. I just feel that God blessed me and I was able to solve some problems for some customers that the major companies couldn't seem to solve.
okay,
And as that happened, I built credibility,
right.
and just like, hey, they treat you good and they know what they're doing. And even if I didn't really know what I was doing, but anyway, it, uh, it just really worked out. I remember when we first went down there, there was none of the major companies had any local representative. And I remember there was my brother heard this from one of the major companies that commented and said, "Well, what's your brother doing down in Mankato? He's running around operating out of the trunk of his car, trying to fix elevators." And they just didn't take me seriously.
Yeah.
But they sent a man to Mankato probably 2 years later and based him in Mankato. But if they'd have done that immediately, it would have really hurt us. But they didn't. They waited and waited and waited. And after he was there like 5 years, he left that company and came to work for us. So there was
Uh-huh.
just certain circumstances that happened that I just feel were God's hand uh, in it. I didn't have any big vision. I didn't have any big, I even said to myself, I'll never go to Minneapolis. I will never go up there for anything. I want to be down here. And I think I drew a circle that was about 40 miles radius, and that's as far as I'm going to go. Well, little by little, I think I told Coralyn just yesterday, I think we've installed elevators in Minneapolis schools, like in 5, 6 schools up in Minneapolis. And that just led to more
Yeah.
work and more work. And so we were manufacturing elevator equipment by then. And my older brother, who worked for one of the major companies, he bought a freight elevator from us that we built. And I never forget, he was going to buy it from another company, another supplier. And he said, "I'll buy it from you." I said, "Well, what's their price?" He said, "I'm not going to tell you their price. You give me your price." So anyway, we ended up opening that door. Then I had one man at our company that really led the charge on that. And that today is probably, well, it's close to half of our business,
Oh,
maybe
wow.
even at times it's more than half of our business. And it's opened the door to a lot of our major elevator companies. And we've done some pretty cool projects because we've got an extremely strong engineering department. A lot of
Yeah.
companies our size
That,
may
that
have
turned
one
in
PE.
Yeah, that turned into one of your niches, didn't it, John? Is
Yeah.
kind of on the engineering side, kind of the just like you talked about starting out with solving a problem that others struggled with. It seems
Hmm.
like God kind of used that to guide your niche. You think that's right? It kind of is that part of the niche? Is
I
the
think it
difficult?
is too. And I think, see, we went through a turnaround in 2006,
Okay.
2005 and six, where I brought in a turnaround guy to get our company turned around. We were in deep doo-doo. We really
Yeah.
were. I would say we were 60 days away from filing bankruptcy. That's how tough it was. And it was
Wow.
just a combination of about two or three different issues that were major issues that all happened under my watch. I'm not
Yep.
blaming anybody.
Yep.
I mean, you
Yep.
could point fingers and umpteen directions, but the buck stopped with me. And I was in over my head. Brought in a turnaround guy who today is our president, and
Yep.
that really got us turned around and got us focused on the right things. Because I think my pride, I didn't want any of the majors coming down in our area. Well, the majors came out with real cheap elevator equipment, and today a lot of the equipment that gets installed in our area is not by us. And Rick, the leader of our company now, he got us focused where we needed to be focused on the specialty type custom
Yeah.
elevators. And I was going to say there's a lot of companies, even our size, that maybe have one PE, a professional engineer that can sign off on design work. And I think we have, Coralyn, I think we got 6 or 7 PEs
Yeah.
at
Hmm.
MEI now. So real strong and real sharp people, real passionate people. So that's been a real plus. And I'm so grateful for the turnaround and the different things that happened. And I think back, you know, there was times when I didn't know what to do, but I knew a lot of things I would not do. I would not
Yeah.
be dishonest.
Right.
I would not cheat customers. I would not be lazy. I would work hard. I'd go the extra mile for customers. I know those things I could do. And I think sometimes I stack my skills or my commitment to that against some of the commitments you see to some people where we hire people from some of the major companies, and their biggest issue why they leave other companies is because of money. They push
Mm.
people too hard. They don't care about the people like they should. And it's a simple thing, to be honest. I remember, I don't know who was it told me, and you've probably heard this comment. If you work hard and you're honest, you'll beat 95% of the people out there.
Well, I think about it. Thanks for sharing that, and also the struggle because I think it's important. We all struggle at some point, and I'm sure there's somebody listening to this right now who's in one of those points. And I mean, heck, the business had been going for over 30 years when that was happening. So it
Right.
it, it can happen at any time. It's not just the early days, and so I really appreciate you sharing that. I think the second thing, there's a sort of prosperity gospel thing out there, right? Like if I
Mhm.
follow God and do these things, good things will happen. Well, one of the ways I put it, I don't think that's true. God can do whatever he wants, but we happen to live in a capitalistic society that's a democracy where if you treat people well, kind of using those biblical principles of treating people fairly, the golden rule and all these kind of things, and your employees the same way, it's actually good for business. If you live in a capitalistic society that kind of rewards customer first, activities, so I think those old tried and true, I'd call them biblical principles. They're just basic. A lot of people have written business books on these, but they're all just biblical principles.
Mhm.
Tend to lead it. Is that kind of how you felt? Like you just do the basics and be honest with me. And if you have a problem, hey, I don't know how to solve it. Let's work on it together. Let's just solve the problem
Right.
together.
Right, right. And take ownership for issues. I
Exactly.
remember one time we had a little church down in southwestern Minnesota where a hydraulic elevator with a cylinder underground had there's a lot of electrolysis down there and it eaten through the cylinder and they like after 3 years, which is kind of unusual. Well, it's a
Okay.
major, major issue. Thousands fixed. So when I found out about it, I talked to the mechanic that put the job in, and he said, he said, I had an issue getting the cylinder into the ground, and he said, maybe the protection that we put on the cylinder may have gotten scuffed. I said, really? We went down, we tore the thing apart, we rebuilt some stuff and charged the customer nothing because we could have stood on our warranty and said, hey, you got a 1 year warranty, you got bad ground down here.
Right.
But we went the extra mile. I'm just not saying that to brag, but it's just if you do things right, I believe God blesses it,
Yeah,
you
well,
know.
and maybe you don't make money. Maybe you even lose money on that project, but maybe they become a repeat customer. Or they tell somebody else, like in the long run,
Right.
right? It pays off, right?
Right. Right.
So and now I do want to bring Coralyn, sorry, into the conversation. And so now that it's grown, you've got a few hundred employees, and I just love this origin story because it's just it just seems like you tell it in such a simple fashion, but it's got to be a decent sized company, and you brought Coralyn in. Why'd you bring Coralyn in?
Well, we started meeting, Coralyn and I and three other people, right?
Hmm.
Vern and Nick and James. And we started talking about doing these things and, just getting our feet wet. We can do a little of this, a little, let's just go out and do something, that we can get people involved in it. And then uh, Coralyn had written a job description for this position. And I happened to be in India, coming back from India after being in India for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And when I read the job description she wrote, I thought, because prior to that, I was thinking, you know what, we'll get this moving along. I can get people in HR to do this and do that. We can just kind of piecemeal this together and do some good
Right.
stuff. But when I read the job description she'd written on her own, if this position could ever happen, I thought, oh my God, this is what I'd like to see happen and far beyond. You know what I mean?
Right.
Far beyond. It's like me building a little addition or a little porch on a house, and all of a sudden somebody said, "Hey, we could remodel the whole house here, and we could do look, and I can do
Okay. Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
this."
That's quite
Gotcha.
the compliment.
Right. And the thing
Gotcha.
is that without tooting, you better shut your mic down, Coral, so you don't hear this because I don't want you to get a big head. But the thing that she had that so many people don't have is passion,
Yeah.
passion to make a difference, and passion to care for people, and take the charge and lead the charge. I had other people that could do things. If I said, "Hey, let's do this," yep, we'll do it. Hey, can we do this? Okay. Or now I've said to her one time, "You're like a popcorn popper. All of a sudden the kernels are popping all over the place with ideas and stuff, and we work together good. And that
Yeah.
it's been just a really
Well, take an initiative and those kind of things. So let's turn to Corlin. Now, you'd already worked in the business, and then you sort of transitioned into this role, right? So t tell us about your journey a little bit with the company.
Yeah, it's an interesting story, and I feel like probably my origin story is important to your listeners and the
Yeah.
fact that there's probably a lot of people out there that are thinking, man, I would really like to do some of these things and move in this direction, but who am I going to have to lead this charge? And the
So true.
reality is, you probably already have somebody on your team. You
Mm,
might not just know. Without getting deep into my job history, I had been a sales manager for a decade. I had, after that, I kind of transitioned into nonprofit leadership, and because I wanted to
now you
use
gotta
my
go find
forces for
something.
good, right? And so, little did I know as I go dive into the sector, you can work for the forces of good, for profit, nonprofit, all the things. The kind of ironic story is that I had MEI as one of my contacts as a non-donor, and so I had figured out a way to get a meeting with John Romnes while I was working at this nonprofit, kind of prior to MEI. And we ended up meeting, having a lunch for probably about an hour and a half, talking this much, a little bit about the nonprofit I was working for, but a lot about John's mission, vision, values. And I walked away from that meeting, ironically thinking, I didn't get a donation, but man, I would, if I ever had the opportunity to work for that company, I want
wow.
to. Fast forward, job opened up in the sales department, and I applied for it. And I ended up getting it. But I had, as John was saying, I found myself on this little organic team where a handful of us were just working on how we could get volunteering a little bit more in MEI's culture. John comes in and he says, I really want to build compassion and generosity into the core of our business. And so I had we had been working on this organically, and his idea was, he had been out and he's been to India where he's tapped fresh water wells for people that have never had clean drinking water. We've built orphanages and hospitals, and where he's seen all this just remarkable change when you can invest a little bit of funding and see this huge impact. And his idea was is that how could we offer the same kind of experience to our employees. It changes you when you have that experience. And how could I offer that to our teams that want to raise their hand and participate? Well, we started working on this, started working on this project, and I'm trying to sell elevators and then also create these
Right.
outreach
Yep.
initiatives and
Yeah.
realize, oh my goodness, like this is a full-time job. And so
Right.
as John had mentioned, I kind of took a step of faith and wrote up this job description and got the approval. But the crazy thing is that what we've been doing, what Emmy had been doing with their giving and their generosity was fine. I mean, great even. You'd have your list of charitable organizations that you support, you volunteer with them a little bit, they give you back your update of what they did with your funding. But what we started doing is sending our own teams out. And so a really big part of my role is we have immersive service trips that we do. We average maybe 4, 5, 6 trips a year. There's small trips, 5, 6 people that go out at a time, but we take a little group of people from all over our company and we go out and we serve for a week at a time. It's kind of a little bit, it was kind of a little bit like going to camp as adults, but um, it's interesting. And so I get to lead these trips, and a lot of our employees have never done
Right.
anything like this before. But the really cool thing is that they come back, and it's always a requirement. We do a company-wide meeting once a month, and when people come back, we have them share the story. So now it's not the
Okay,
nonprofits
good.
giving their updates on what they did with our funding. It's our own employees who have had
Mm,
boots on the ground, saw the need, helped it, and then shared the story of impact with our other employees. And so these employees of ours just really become our ambassadors, and so
yeah.
and then they invite somebody else, and it's been and so I just actually ran our 2025 numbers, and we've had over 100 employees go on these trips. We've had just an exceptional amount of impact, evaluations where people come back where they want to grow in their giving, their faith, they start thinking about things differently. And so it's been a really rewarding experience that came out of something that John set the vision, and I just was like, how can we execute this?
Hey, John, Coralyn, that's so great. Thank you for that. John, this sounds familiar. I have a woman on my team who wrote her own job description. I didn't even know I needed it, and it's one of the best things that's ever happened to me. So I'm working. I'm living in a parallel universe here. But
Yeah,
John, let me ask
cool.
you this. Let me play skeptic for a second, okay? Maybe somebody's listening to this and said, "Well, that's all great to do a mission trip at church or whatever else, but why should I do that as a business?" How would you respond to that question?
Well, a simple answer would be because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And I think that some people will look at compassion and generosity and it may take a transition, but they may look at that as well. It's a tool in my toolbox. You know what I mean? If
Yeah,
I'm generous and have compassion, the bottom line is going to be better.
right.
But I think we moved into this without the idea that the bottom line would be better. I think
Okay.
compassion and generosity has to become a part of your character. It can't be a tool in your toolbox. And I think that's where people will make a mistake. We have a fantastic improvement program at our company. How many improvements have we had, Corlin? 100 and close to 200,000 improvements.
Correct.
And I've had people come in and say, "Yeah, I want to get that going," and it fizzles because they just don't want to put the effort into doing the right thing and knowing that you're going to be rewarded for it. And uh, even if it starts small, even if you do things that are just small, it's the right thing to do. And as you begin to do the right thing, you begin to see your people begin to look at it and say, "Gosh, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of it." We have people that have come to work at MEI and have said the main reason I came here is because I know that it's a company that gets involved helping other people, and you do a lot of charitable type things that want to come to work at our company. So
It seems like you're operating a business with a great culture before culture was really a word
yeah,
in business lingo. Is that
right.
fair to say?
Yeah. I think some people look at it, we want to have a good culture so we make more money. And
Right, right. Like, what's your motivation, right? Your motivation's
what's
not
your
necessarily the bottom line. I think that's key, right?
even like when we started these trips, I mean, Coral and I would talk a lot about these trips, and we've done, I don't know how many trips we've done to Kentucky in just a very poverty-stricken area. And my own mindset was, we'll go there and help these poor people, these people that just
Right.
are really hurting. I never thought, and I don't think you did either, Coralyn, that what the impact it would have on our people.
Right.
I mean,
Coralyn, what's some of that impact been? What do you hear back from them?
I think that when I look back and I've got every time we come back, I send out an evaluation and ask people what they feel, but
Right.
it's really I mean, I'll tell you a story. I had a guy, uh, Rusty, and ironically, we actually started work at MEI on the same day. We literally filled out our onboarding paperwork together.
Yeah.
And he was from the plant, I was from the office. I'm like, "Hi, how you doing?" And he's like, "Good," like solid head nod, not engaging. I'm like, "Okay,
Yeah.
noted." So I went to the office, he went to the plant, and so fast forward, I didn't really talk to him very much until we started doing these we call them insight trips. And the one of the guys was on the first trip that we went on. Part of their role is like, okay, give me another person. Who can you recruit from the plant? And so he had mentioned that Rusty was interested. And I look at him, I'm like, are you serious? Like Rusty? He's so crabby. And so, but we don't really have a parameter in terms of who, if you raise your hand and you
Yeah.
want to go, like
You're
all things
going.
being equal, you're going. And
Yeah.
so here's Rusty is on this trip, and it turns out Rusty's amazing. Like he's hilarious. He's a hard worker, got along with the family we were serving. I mean, it was like, it changed my mind. Well, we end up getting back from that trip, and a couple days later, I get Rusty's supervisor comes into my office, and he's kind of in a huff. He sits down in my chair with his arms crossed, and I'm thinking he's mad.
Right.
Well, he looks at me and he's like, what did you do to Rusty? And I don't know what he's talking about. And turns out that he came back from that trip. And, normally like they come back on a Monday and everyone's griping about, oh, we got to, it's another Monday. Nobody wants to work. Everyone's kind of in a bad mood coming back to work. And Rusty looks at everyone. They're all complaining. He's like, I don't want anything to do with this. I'm in a good mood. See you later. And this had been something that the supervisor had noticed day in and day out until he got back. And Rusty had a change of heart. And what's interesting since then is that we have a KPI that we measure that John had mentioned. He had never hit his goal. That year, after coming back, hit his goal. Rusty got a promotion. He also lost 40 pounds, which I can't say that this is a weight loss program, but
Is a
but something
positive.
had clicked. Yeah, something had clicked in him. And what's great about it, even better, is that his supervisor was so moved by the change that he saw in Rusty that he went on the next trip that we had and he came back even more impacted.
Wow.
And so I think that to answer your question is I think that these trips, they take people out of our normal day to day because we go to a place, we're not serving down the road. We like a normal business trip. We're on a plane, we're staying in a hotel or at the mission center, and you get to disconnect and get fully immersed in the needs of somebody else. And there's no expectation and they can't give us anything in return. And that is an experience that very few people have. And it changes you when you have the opportunity to serve somebody in that capacity. And then and then it becomes like a group. Like so now we've got this like core group of people that have been on these trips and they all can talk about the families that they've met, the people at the organizations that we serve at. They were all kind of relationship building over time, and it's become as John said, it was just like we're all trying to do some good and let's see what happens. And this whole service trip initiative has become a core part of our culture. And now I used to like have to pull teeth to get people to sign up for these. I didn't think that that was going to be an issue, but now I've got a whole list of people that are like,
Uh-huh.
all right, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go, from our mechanics to office people to some guys in our plant. And it's a really fun thing to be a part of.
I really thank you, Coralyn. John, one of the things that I love about what you said is it's like, why am I doing it? It's just the right thing to do. Like, I like where the motivation came from. You didn't read it in some business book on page, chapter 7 says, take your people on trips to do
Mhm.
good work and your bottom line will improve. But my guess is, so I love the motivation. And I think I bet people can read where it comes from. Is it from chapter 7? Or are you just doing it for
Mhm.
the bottom line, or are you doing it for pure intentions? But I think another outcome is that it is good maybe for business. My guess is retention may be better than the industry. You talked, John, about maybe people come to you because they want to be a part of a place that's doing this sort of thing. Have those things surprised you a little, John?
A little bit. a little bit. And it's not the motivation. It's just that,
It's an
well, I
outcome.
think, yeah, it's an outcome. And I think when we talk about compassion and generosity, I think values we say without an agenda. So many people with their compassion, there's an agenda. With their generosity, there's an agenda. I will give some money to such and such because maybe we'll get this big elevator project. You
Right.
know, and we don't have that. We've literally between personally and MEI, we've drilled hundreds of freshwater wells in India. I don't want to brag, but it's the
Yeah,
truth. And
yeah.
I've seen the wells, hundreds of wells. We will never sell an elevator in India. I,
Right.
I can't even imagine ever selling one. We've been to Kentucky. How many people, Coralyn? 100 probably people have been to Kentucky. We'll
Yep.
probably never sell an elevator in that area unless we give them an elevator to the
Right.
organization we work with. And I think that can be a test of our generosity and compassion if there's no agenda, there's no hooks to it. And I
Yeah.
think that's I
I
think
think
that's
you're really
important.
onto something here. I think you're really onto something about it's a heart issue, not really a head or spreadsheet issue. You know,
Right,
just
right.
do it
And
because it's the right thing to
I
do.
think it goes back to I think back in the 80s when I made a comment to myself and I shared with other people that God is my God, not money. And there's been times that's hurt. Why do we have to have a turnaround? Why do I have to bring in a turnaround
Right.
person? Because I didn't pay enough attention to the money. But
Uh,
God is my God, not money. And I think that is so important. And I think as a result of that, got in a guy that's a turnaround person that is endorses I think what didn't Rick go out to Kentucky?
Yeah, he's been on one of our insight trips as well. In
Right,
a
right.
hazmat suit underneath the house doing some insulation. It was great.
Yeah. And some of the connections that have been made. I mean,
yeah.
I think of one of the gals in accounting that was in Kentucky, and she came back and she said to me, she says, I teamed up with a guy that's a project manager in Kansas City. And she said, he taught me how to put down flooring. So, you know
Right.
what? She said, I could lay flooring in a house now. She said, I learned some things.
Yeah.
She said, and just some of the stuff that went on and just everybody getting involved. And I got a picture somewhere of Coralyn up on a 20-foot ladder down in Kansas City, Habitat for Humanity, slopping paint on the wall and paint on her jeans and whatever. So it isn't like we point and push. We
Yeah.
point and we get in there and roll up our sleeves and do stuff.
Yeah. Love it.
That's no representation of my ability to paint a good house, though.
Right.
Coralyn, I'm not. We're not going to put your contact information out there to paint a house, but do you mind if we put it out there if some other company wants to start maybe doing something like this? Would it be okay if they contacted you?
Absolutely.
So we'll put your
I
email in the
love
show
those phone
notes.
calls and I love those
Okay,
emails.
okay. And I know that's how we met was kind of part of a group of companies that's thinking this way. So that's been a joy.
Yeah.
But uh, John, well, we always wrap this up, John and Coralyn, with, and maybe I'll ask each of you this question. And John, I'll start with you if you don't mind. Just for some business owner on the path behind you, and is kind of attracted to this path, but not quite sure, knowing where to start. What advice? What's just one piece of advice you'd have for them? How can they get started? Do something tomorrow.
Yeah, I would say if you're doing nothing, start doing something. I
Just do
think of
something.
others. I think of an individual. I don't know if you ever heard of Convoy of Hope. That
Hmm.
was started by a man named Hal Donaldson. He met Mother Teresa,
Oh
and
yeah.
Mother Teresa looked at him and said, "Young man, what are you doing to help the poor?" And he said, I guess probably nothing. He went back and started what eventually became Convoy of Hope. And I think just start doing something, even if it's small, 1%. If you're a business owner, say, I'm going to take 1% of our profits and I'm going to somehow use that to help other people. Maybe it can mean I can go myself. I've been on mission trips and I've been to Peru. I can start telling all kinds of boastful stories, I guess. But I mean, I've been to India, I've been to Peru, I've been to Argentina, I've built churches. I've done a lot of things, and that's what makes a difference. It really makes a difference. So I would say start small. Even if it's 1%, and think long term. Think long term. We're going to do this. Maybe we'll take the 1% and go to 2% in a couple of years. But think long term. Don't. It takes time for things to take root. So many times people plant something, and they pull the plant up to look at the roots to see how the roots are doing. Well, it doesn't work.
I
And
like that.
you're investing in people and you're investing in eternity. If you're already doing something, increase what you're doing or look for ways that maybe you can team up with someone else and do it better. Network. I mean, Coralyn, was it last year? I think we talked about, and we said, hey, let's try to connect with 3 other companies or whatever it was. I don't even remember what the goal we set. Well, this last year, one of the major construction companies in our area, Coralyn spearheaded a trip down to Missouri, wasn't it?
Yep.
And they went down there, and leadership people went down there. She orchestrated it, but that was part of our desire, a ripple effect. We wanted to do what we're doing and not so much, oh, look at MEI, look at all the cool stuff we do. And I think we do some cool stuff. But what are you doing? And what can we do to get you to do something? Because that's the ripple effect that can happen. And look for ways to have a ripple effect. And I think compassion must be the driver of our generosity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Refuse to see generosity and compassion in your toolbox as a way to increase your money god.
Yeah.
If you and make compassion and generosity become a character trait, you as the leader, and be transmitted to your team in words and actions. Words and actions, and this all must be grounded in your desire to please God with your life.
Yeah.
And one other quick story I'll tell you that I had one page of notes here. I missed that one page, but anyway, this is like in 2009, probably 2007. I was talking to my financial advisor, an attorney, and he said, "Well, you need to start a foundation. Put so much money in the foundation every year. After a period of years, when you're dead and gone, 5% can go. You know all about foundations.
Yeah.
Can go to whatever." So, which I did. I started the foundation. Then my attorney said, I said, "You got yourself, your wife, and your 2 sons on the board. You should have an outsider." So I said, okay. So I started thinking about who that could be. Well, I thought of a businessman in our area that's a real committed Christian, committed financially. And so I decided to have lunch with him. We went out and had lunch, and I started talking to him. He used to be a bank president, so he knew more about foundations than I did. So we started talking, and he looks at me and he said, I remember vividly, we're sitting in a pizza place. He leans across the table and he said, "Well, you can do the foundation thing, but you know what you're going to miss out on." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "In my mind, I thought, it's kind of a noble thing to do." He said, "You don't know what you're going to miss out on?" I said, "No." He said, "You're going to miss out on the fun of giving your money away."
Exactly.
And that cut me to the core. And after that, it changed me. It changed me. That was like in March. That summer, I went to India, and my friend who had started an orphanage there, the Ark Home, small little building, 2 little girls he'd rescued who were at the time were 4 and 6 years old. And we're talking about it. And he said, "Yeah, we just got the building built. I'd never seen it before. I'd never been to India before." He said, "Yeah," he said, "It's set up. So some days, I don't know, it'll probably never happen." But he said, "We could put a second floor on here." I said, "Really?" I said, "Paul, how much does that second floor cost?" And he told me. And I stood there for a while. And I said, "I can do that." I started crying, honestly. He looked at me, "You got to be kidding." I said, "I'll give you the money." He said, "When?" I said, "When we get back." He said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah." Well, a year later, I went back. It's a 2-story orphanage. There's like 8 little girls there. Now that ministry's got like 25 girls in it. And they're rescuing out of prostitution and trafficking or whatever. But that was the fun of giving my money away. And then since then, I've traveled all over the world, And I tell people, all money is pieces of scraps of paper with pictures of dead guys on it. Until you do something with it, until you take it out of your pocket and do something with it.
Yeah, it's not
And
that much fun to give away money when you're dead.
no,
I
it
mean,
doesn't.
that
It
to be
doesn't work so
blunt.
good.
I mean, you're missing out on the fun.
Right,
So I
right.
really like that. Like we always talk about, doing your giving while you're living, so you're knowing where it's going. I mean, you don't,
Yeah.
Right.
Coralyn, that's so good, John. Thank you. Coralyn, what would you say for maybe somebody behind you on the journey or some other company that's, wanting to do this kind of thing, but where do they get started? They're not going to take 100 people next year. How do they start?
Right. Right. But you can start with one. And it doesn't
Right.
necessarily need to be a trip, but I think that
Yeah.
where we started was small. And we just thought is that, okay, if we want to build compassion and generosity into our culture, what does a compassionate and generous person look like? And just start moving in those directions. I
Right.
think the big thing is taking a little bit of risk. I listened to a faith-driven entrepreneur podcast not that
Yeah.
long ago, and they talked about having this righteous risk. And I think that if you can take a step of faith and invest in some of these things, and most importantly, don't take your employees out of the equation. I think a lot of the companies that I network with,
Yeah.
they are generous, but the generosity is stuck at the leadership level, and they're doing a great thing, and let's not stop doing that. But we have been blessed with so many people within our reach and our circles with our employee base that you can start working. And once you start putting, I think what it took is John putting a stake in the ground saying, hey, this is what we want to do, hiring somebody like me, but then also just talking about this. And you'll be surprised the amount of people that come out and say, hey, I'm interested in this too. I want to help. And we wouldn't have built the system that we have had we not had our employees step up. And so it's not me just doing this. It's not just somebody else. It's all of us doing a little bit that produces this real culture of compassion and generosity. And it's just been, it's been a remarkable journey, working under John's mentorship. It's been, we have a lot of fun just thinking out loud about what could be.
Well, I love it. Just doing it for the right reason, just doing it because it's the right thing to do, and start small,
Right.
and think long term. I really
Just get out there
appreciate
and
you.
do some good and let's see what happens,
Yeah, just
right?
see what happens. Probably good
Let's just
things.
see
That
what
thing's probably
happens.
going to snowball on you, and you get the
Right.
fun of
And it
it.
might.
Yeah, to your point, John. So
Yeah.
anyway, Coralyn, thanks for being with us. John, thanks for being with us today.
It's been
Thank
great.
you.
It's been
All
good.
right. Thanks, everybody. And thanks
Yeah.
for joining
Thank you.
us. Thanks for listening and watching today. Share it with a friend on YouTube, subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Generous Business Owner Podcast with Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can find the guest contact information in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode.